Have mercy on me, a sinner.
I'm gonna record this since everything we're saying is golden here. Um, yeah, I wasn't sure what that was, the can't use my name thing, because like I said, I had old versions and now I got, I guess, fairly new versions. They say the PPX recordings, blah, blah, blah. And it just feels official. When I came across the one that said Ballad for Jimmy, and,
Okay.
and that they could have put them all on one CD back in the day, but that was volume 3, and it was a song about Jimmy dying 5 years from now, which is what happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let me miss it. But then it also had just some instrumental vamps of Jimmy and some cats, which
Yeah.
I liked. I used in the background a lot.
Like the Happy Birthday, they had the long instrumental where you can really hear the funk in the music, without Curtis Knight singing, with just Jimmy straight playing, and
Yeah.
that bass that Jimmy's actually playing the bass on that, and you could tell that he loved to listen to James Jamerson and people like that from Motown.
Mm. Oh, man, well, let's just jump in because we got to jump in and jump out because 2 hours ain't enough music, ain't enough time to talk, to play Jimmy, talk with an expert such as yourself, and squeeze in. I know I'm gonna play some of that. Bob Davis sent me the Ernie Isley stuff when he was talking, and that's pretty historic for a regular Jimmy listener that may not know, because I know I was floored when he said
Yeah.
Jimmy live with them. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Let me reprogram my whole sort of timeline of
Yeah.
how they
Definitely.
did what they did. So I'm gonna add a few little formalities, edit them in. Rickey Vincent here, the history of funk with Stevie G, and the one and only Corey Washington, the author of really the definitive book about Black Jimmy. Where did I put it? What's the title of the book, my man?
Jimi Hendrix, Black Legacy, A Dream Deferred.
Jimi Hendrix Black Legacy. And that idea it's like having to say Black Rock. It's like, why do we even have to say this? Why do we even have to go there? But it had to be done. Um, I'll just tell you, Corey, when I was in high school, I was around a lot of white kids that like to rock out to their hard rock music. And they talked about Jimmy like he was one of them, like he was a rocker. And so I thought Jimmy was a white boy. I didn't have that narrative of Jimmy's life and Jimmy belonging to us. And I
Right.
don't think I was an exception.
I wrote my first book in 2010, Nobody Cages Me, where I kind of explored that and how I came to know Jimmy. I first saw him in the context of, like you said, a rocker, a psychedelic rocker, Woodstock, Monterey. Didn't see any black people around him. I think even when it came to Billy Cox, they would cut him out and play, him and Mitch Mitchell, and you wouldn't even know that Billy Cox was there. So I didn't even get that part of it. Just
Right.
forget about the band of Gypsies. So all of this stuff was just unknown to me. It was like a mystery.
Wow. Um, Talking with Corey Washington, author of one of the definitive, maybe the definitive book about Jimi Hendrix's connection to the Black experience, having to say something obvious. Um,
Right.
Now, I remember two events that kind of turned me around with the narrative. One was David Henderson's book, Excuse Me While I Kiss the Sky. And I had plunged into that book before I realized that he was a brother that was writing it. I was like, well, this is telling it like it needs to be told. This is cool. He's got, details and he personalizes things. And then when he said, the roadies smashed up Juma Sultan's drum kit at Woodstock, I was like, oh, he's telling that level of truth.
Right, definitely. Juma confirms that, him, not just Juma, but also Jerry Velez, the Puerto Rican brother.
Mm-hmm.
They messed his stuff up too. He was also on another set of drums, more like a Latin percussion type thing.
Right, right. And of course, the whole story of Jimmy really trying to go in another rhythm driven direction with his work. Um, I don't know, maybe I can't imagine he was there the whole time, but Santana kind of blew minds with their Afro-Cuban rhythm approach to guitar rock.
Right.
And it seemed like Jimmy was heading in that direction with his Gypsy Suns and Rainbows at Woodstock.
Right, that was definitely a template. I think Jimmy had that extra layer of Larry Lee,
Uh-huh.
another brother, one of his army buddies, on the rhythm guitar. They didn't really get to explore that like they wanted to, but at Woodstock they cut Larry Lee's part out. They for years they buried it, where he did Curtis Mayfield's Gypsy Woman. They cut that out of Woodstock. We could have had that for years and could have known Jimmy's love for Curtis Mayfield, because you could always hear it in his guitar playing.
Man, that's right. Jimi Hendrix was a soul brother, and it's just extra time we got to spend making something obvious clear to a lot of people.
Just a
Um,
quick point before you move on. I just came to an epiphany maybe less than a month ago. You mentioned something very interesting. The first two people to actually write Jimi Hendrix bios were brothers. David Henderson, like you said, was the first, but then the second one was Curtis Knight. His book came out in the 70s. And then after that, you had a long drought where you didn't have any Black people writing about Jimmy. And so I thought that was very interesting.
and that meant the shelves were filled with folks that to some degree were outsiders.
Right.
That's the way to put it. It's not like they're not valid, and some are brilliant writers, but to some degree, I felt like I was reading an outsider narrative,
Yeah,
because the things
definitely.
that I was interested in weren't necessarily being emphasized, and if they were like, Jimmy was holding court with some intimidating looking Black Panthers.
Yeah, that kills me. I think Mitch was it either no, I think either Mitch Mitchell or Noel Redding had an account where Jimmy was surrounded by a bunch of dangerous Black Panthers, and he was just looking at me to come in there and save the day. And so I came in there and said something to these guys and told them to beat it, and it just didn't make sense to
It
No,
doesn't
that
make
doesn't make
sense.
sense at all.
me. So
And because Jimmy knew a lot of the Seattle Panthers.
right, right. I didn't know that. I mean, they hit me to that a lot of his friends back in Seattle became Panthers later on.
And
So I mean, definitely.
Aaron Dixon and Elmer Dixon were founders of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panthers.
Okay.
So he had a comfort zone, and I didn't really catch it or recognize it until the West Coast Seattle Boy film came out, and Jimmy's letters to his dad. He read them. Bootsy read them, and so it had a good kind of feel. But we're talking 30 years down the line of telling this story, but you get the impression that Jimmy is like every other impoverished nomadic Black brother trying to make something happen, and you understand people coming from nothing trying to make something happen.
Right. What
So
was Tupac's mother's name?
a Fenny.
Afeni Shakur, Matulu Shakur. What was the trial that they had? That he was getting ready to do a benefit for those brothers and sisters, but I think his manager kind of got in the way, Mike Jeffrey. But
For
that's
the New York
that's
21.
right,
I
right.
can see him blocking that.
Yeah, yeah. He was getting ready to do a benefit concert for those guys, and his manager blocked it.
Really?
Right.
Man, so much going on. And but I think now, Corey, I have bootlegs of Jimmy Plays Berkeley when he gives a shout out to People's Park and a shout out to the Black Panthers. And I don't think we understood or took it that seriously, other than that's what a lot of people would have said in spring of 1970 in Berkeley, that kind of thing. But when you start to line it all up, you see how Jimmy was paying attention to what was happening in the world on the ground.
Right. He was using the language of the times. He was even calling them pigs. I think I spoke to you earlier about he made a quip about the Star Spangled Banner. Here's a song that we was all brainwashed with. He was really speaking his mind. And I mean, it had to be very scary to the powers that be to have the number one pop or whatever you want to call him star at that time. Just, doing whatever he wanted to. Very, not gonna compare him to Kanye and all that, but I mean, this guy he was out there. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind. Let's put it that way.
He was a free thinker,
Right, exactly.
and on top of being what Kanye could never be, which is a genius musician, but that's another conversation. Um, but I mean, that's what I think inspired so many people of all walks of life, that he was not in a box
Right.
and he couldn't be contained. He couldn't be chained. Isn't that some music mix you did? Don't chain. What did you do? A mix? Don't chain me or something?
For which one? The
You just said
nobody.
you sent me a mix of some music that said "Don't chain me." I think.
It was it was a lot of his stuff I mixed up. He was saying power to the people. I mean, he was saying, straight ahead is another phrase of the People's Party. I mean, he had the language down pat. I mean, you have to decipher a lot of this stuff because it went over a lot of his normal fans' heads. They didn't quite get it, and that's what I try to bring out a lot in my book, Nobody Cage. I mean, Jimi Hendrix Black Legacy, trying to tie him directly into what was going on at the time.